into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm Alfredo Brown. Joined as always, I've got Dave Kluge with me, and we are taking a look at the Week 11 waiver wire targets. Dave, there is more hope on the horizon, I think, as we get closer to the fantasy playoffs. And there's a lot of these handcuff running backs and running backs that look like they might just be taking over the roles altogether. So there's a lot of hope out there for fantasy managers that are looking to add another piece off the waiver wire.
Who could have possibly seen this coming, Alfredo? All of these rookie running backs who were disappointing in the first half of the season are starting to heat up. My goodness, who could have possibly predicted this?
Who could have foreseen that it takes time for rookies to get better? Wow. Yeah. Who'd have thunk it?
I mean, we talked about it all out preseason. We talked about it early this year. Like, you got to exercise patience. Like, these rookies aren't going to come out week one and be studs. Of course, you've got your Marvin Harrison Jr.'s and your Brian Thomases and these guys that can just do it. But for the average rookie, it does take some time. And we're starting to see some of these guys who like really struggled early in the season. The game's starting to slow down for them a little bit. They're starting to look a little bit better. And we're talking about quite a few rookies on today's show.
Yeah, you mentioned the game slowing down for different players and rookies in particular. I know that one of the guys that's going to be talked about a lot on a bunch of waiver wire shows is going to be Ricky Pearsall, and we're not talking about him today simply because he doesn't meet the available roster percentage threshold that we
And
look for.
also, if you listen to our show, you already have
You had him
Pearsall. Yeah,
a month ago.
we've been telling you for months. Yeah.
Yes. He was one of the players that we wanted to draft. He should have been on your IR. You should have picked him up a month ago with waiver wire. But this is a guy that he's looked good, but you can tell watching him that the game around him is a little fast. He's not running his routes with the normal veracity that he does. Now, a lot of it could still just be recovering from the gunshot wound, but a lot of it is just simply these players need time to get up to speed. And he kind of got thrown into the mix here for the Niners. But meanwhile, while not totally looking like he's at full speed yet and having a full understanding of what's going on around him, still looks decent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's it. Like, he is a freak athlete. And I think a lot of people see Ricky Pearsall and they think, oh, he's that sneaky athlete, the gym rat, the first guy in, last guy out type of guy. But like, no, Ricky Pearsall's thrown down like
Wes Welker type.
Yeah. Yeah, Ricky Pearsall is not a Wes Welker type of receiver. He's not gonna beat you with his mind. Like, this guy is a great athlete. We've seen videos of him throwing down 360 dunks on a basketball court, and we saw that catch last year that he made at Florida, like probably the catch of the year in the NCAA, where he just skied up, did like the Jordan logo in midair, and just one-handed a ball. Like, he is a very good athlete. So even though right now, like, the nuance might not be there for him, he might still be struggling with getting up to NFL speed. If he sees a little patch of green, he's going to take it. And we saw that yesterday with a big touchdown.
Yeah, I think that you and I were talking prior to the show that I think that he's going to be one of those players that is really good by week 15 or 16 when it doesn't matter. And it's really only going to be the rich getting richer for the people that already had a good fantasy team that made it all the way through their playoffs. And they're like, oh, cool. The Ricky Pearsall kid's finally paying off for me. And that's about it. So it's unfortunate.
Toilet bowls.
Yeah, exactly. Just killing it.
I will say the last thing I want to mention about this, though, we talked about it a lot last week. I talked about it on Harris Football. I talked about it with you. I talked about it with Jeff Bell. Kind of who the wide receiver 2 would be. Juwan Jennings obviously has the history with the team, and Ricky Pearsall is the very athletic rookie that they spent premium draft capital on. Juwan Jennings is definitely the wide receiver 2. Like, he led in snaps, routes runs, target, receptions. He is the guy for now. We could see that slider change a little bit, though. They usually have like one wide receiver 2 that gets the majority of the looks, but they were kind of flip-flopping between Pearsall and Jennings yesterday. So while Jennings is the guy now, and I expect him to be for the remainder of the season, we could see that usage starting to tighten up a little bit every single week. So I don't want to say Jennings is like a must-sell player by any means, but those looking at his usage from last week, expecting that to continue for the entire season, it might start to trend down at some point.
All right, so we got the 49ers wide receiver stuff out of the way. Let's do what we do every Monday, where we do our waiver wire draft, where we're going to go back and forth. Dave, you're going to kick us off with your first pick. And we do this kind of going back and forth, picking the players that maybe we think either should be the best waiver wire pickups for you to make, or players that we just really want to address whether or not you should be picking them up. So Dave, why don't you kick us off with the first pick?
Trey Benson is the guy that, I'm talking about him first, and I think he's probably the number one priority guy on this week's waiver wire. The Cards put a whooping on the Jets yesterday, but that game script allowed Trey Benson to see the most touches he's had in a single game since week 2. And in that week 2 matchup, when we saw him get a little bit of run, he looked terrible. And I remember we talked about it, that he was just like happy feet behind the line of scrimmage, couldn't find the hole, was trying to do too much. And in that game, he averaged less than 1 yard per carry. Seems like now he's getting up to NFL speed a little bit. We saw him look like a much more polished runner yesterday. He averaged 6.2 yards per carry, also added 12.5 yards per reception to that. And all the things that made him a pretty desirable prospect were evident yesterday when we saw him on the field. You know, he's got the big size, he's got elite speed and burst, he's got those really sharp cuts that make it tough for defenders to catch up to him. And I think we've seen enough now that early in the season, we saw some Amari DeMercado, and we saw some Michael Carter, I believe, was another guy that was in the mix, and DJ Dallas. But now when you start looking at that depth chart, it seems like it's getting a little bit clearer that Trey Benson is the clear RB2. Now, he only got run in yesterday's game because they were just crushing the Jets. I don't think there's going to be much standalone value here. But again, we talked about it last week. This is cuffing season. You want to stash all of these high-end running backs that you can, and Trey Benson is a talented rookie on an offense that's going to give him plenty of opportunities if Connor goes down. He's the type of guy that you should just stash on your bench, never trusting him in a lineup at this point. But if something happens to James Conner, Trey Benson has huge upside.
Yeah, you mentioned the standalone value stuff, and so much of it just rides on James Conner. He wasn't that efficient on the ground yesterday, but James Conner is one of those guys, like, he never really has these phenomenal games. I mean, he does from time to time, but he always does just enough to keep his job. He makes coaches very happy. He's always the guy that's like churning forward for positive yardage. He doesn't try to bounce outside too much and get cute with it. And that's a little bit of like what has hurt Trey Benson early in his career. So I don't know if there's going to be a way that Trey Benson gets on the field due to poor performance from James Conner. I think it would have to be something where he
Oh,
just
yeah.
falls off in a major way and the Cardinals are vying for the last spot in the playoffs. It would be a very specific scenario. It's possible. But yeah, I think all of this is going to come down to just handcuff ability here for Trey Benson, Dave.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to jinx it, but James Conner has been healthy this year. But you look historically, he missed 4 games last year, missed 4 games the year before that, missed 2 games the year before that, missed 3 games the year before that, missed 6 games the year before that. So James Conner now is having the healthiest season of his career. But if history tells us anything, it's that he's going to miss a handful of games. And if and when he does, you want to be the guy with Trey Benson on your bench, not the guy who is going to the waiver wire and dumping 70% of your fab to try to get it.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna go with my pick here. It's gonna feel very similar. It's not a young guy by any means, but it's a similar situation where the current starting running back has a history of injuries, and this could be a guy that if the lead runner goes down, his role could be massive. And I'm talking about Gus Edwards, running back for the Chargers. He had 10 carries here in his first game back, and it kind of surprised me. One, I did not realize that the Chargers were playing that well and that they were 6-3. That AFC West, they're feisty. They're feisty. They're a little scrappy there, Dave.
Mhm.
Chiefs are 9-0. You got the Broncos, who, I mean, I think they still have a winning record at this moment after this last game, or are they 500? And then the
The Broncos,
Chargers.
yeah, the Broncos are winning. They're looking good.
Yeah.
I believe they're 6-3.
Yeah, like who would have guessed? Honestly, I would not have guessed that the Raiders would be so far behind the
Sorry, five
Chargers.
five and five.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Chargers is 6-3. Yeah.
Yeah, nuts, absolutely nuts. But one thing that I've been seeing now with the Chargers is that they are actually, not only are they in games, but they are able to control the tempo of games. And that's what they've been doing by running. The defense has played so much better than I think a lot of people thought. And Justin Herbert, I I, I don't think that you could give MVP to a guy whose team has struggled at times like the Chargers have, but for how much he really means to that squad and how much he has been able to do with what is around him, Justin Herbert might actually need to end up in the talks for MVP as the season goes on. If the Chargers keep winning and we're looking at them being 8-3 in a couple weeks from now, I actually do think you might have to start to talk about this. And the fact that we have a guy like Gus Edwards coming in to a role where if anything happens to J.K. Dobbins and he's on this offense that is running the ball as well as they are, the team looks as good as they are, Gus Edwards ends up being one of those guys a la Zamir White last year that becomes this league winner. And I think that's a lot of these guys we're going to talk about here, where week 13, 14, 15, everyone's going to be rushing to the waiver wire to go pick these guys up all over again.
Yeah, and J.K. Dobbins, it's really disappointing to see that usage yesterday because J.K. Dobbins was the workhorse when Gus Edwards was healthy early in the season. And then Gus Edwards went down with the injury, and J.K. Dobbins just picked up right where he left off. We saw them try a little bit with the Kamani Vidal experiment, and that didn't work out too well. And I thought that J.K. Dobbins had done enough over the last couple of months that he had just locked in that workhorse role. But man, Gus Edwards coming straight off of IR and seeing 10 carries to J.K. Dobbins 15, immediately turning this into a timeshare, lowers the ceiling for J.K. Dobbins dramatically, and gives Gus Edwards some potential standalone value. So Trey Benson is my number one guy in the week because we saw him look really, really good last week. I think for the first time this entire season, he put some really good stuff on tape, but Gus Edwards is a close number two.
By the way, did you see the Hassan Haskins revenge touchdown? That
Unbelievable. Yeah, that helps
Chargers,
absolutely nobody.
the Chargers let him play 5 snaps. He gets
Mhm.
2 carries. One of them is for a touchdown against his former team, the Titans.
And
Jamar
honestly, I thought Haskins would have a little bit more run because Harbaugh coached him at
Right, in
Michigan.
Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, and Haskins has never really had much of a chance in the NFL. He had a brief opportunity when Derrick Henry went down, and he looked pretty good in that role, and just hasn't really figured it out since. So I was happy he was able to find the end zone yesterday. But like I said, helped absolutely nobody in fantasy.
No, just wait till Jim Harbaugh drafts Donovan Edwards next year and makes it a 4 running back committee over there in Los Angeles. All right, go to your next guy here, Dave. Your second pick.
Audric Estime, another rookie who is heating up in the second half of the season. And we got murmurs earlier in the week that Estime would potentially see an increased workload. Sean Payton has said that for the last few weeks now, and it is yet to come to fruition. But my goodness, he was their workhorse yesterday. 75% opportunity share in this backfield. He was 1 carry and 2 targets for Javonte Williams, 2 carries for Jaleel McLaughlin, and 14 carries for Audric Estime. I got to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Audric Estime. I think he is mostly kind of an early down hammer. I don't think he's going to get a lot of passing down work. So it does limit his ceiling if he's unable to find the end zone. But we can't ignore this change in usage right here. I mean, Javonte Williams was a guy who was seeing 20 plus touches in some of these games. Looked like he was the workhorse. And now all of a sudden it just flips completely on its head. Javonte Williams is essentially worthless, and Audric Estime is now the workhorse. I don't know if this trend is going to continue into week 11, week 12 going forward, but absolutely worth a pickup now because it appears for the time being that Sean Payton prefers Audric Estime the bunch.
What is so annoying about this team, and I'll be able to illustrate how little faith I have in Sean Payton and his decision making going forward, is that we just never know who's going to be the running back. Like, it feels like, what was it, 6-7 weeks ago, we were all like, all right, Jaleel McLaughlin, this is his backfield now, and then we felt comfortable, all right, it's Javonte Williams, it's his backfield, and now
Remember
Javonte
Blake
Williams.
Watson in the preseason? Like everyone was like, Blake Watson's going to be the guy. And then Michael
Yeah,
Burton comes out, their fullback, and he's getting way more touches than we
Tyler
expected.
Bidet,
Yeah. Oh
like
my
he
God. I
had a cup
forgot
of
about
coffee,
that. We
right?
did talk about him on this show. Yep. Yep. Yep.
So what's funny is, like, I have so little interest in a Sean Payton running back at this point because of how much he's hurt us, that
I feel you.
as you were saying all that, I decided to look up the origin of the word murmur, because I was like, that's a funny word. I just want to see where it came from. The word murmur comes from the Latin word murmurare, meaning to mutter, to make a gentle sound, to roar, or to grumble. So,
Hmm.
yeah, there you go.
I did
Educational.
study Latin for 4 years. So maybe that was just
Why
came
did
out
you
of
study
nowhere. I
Latin?
didn't even realize.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. It would have been really smart to like study a language that actually had like practical use in today's world, but I
Spanish,
thought that it would be really cool to
French.
study Latin instead. And then I didn't realize until about a month into that class that it's not even a spoken language. I was like,
Nope.
okay, so now I understand like roots of many other languages, but can't speak anything except English.
Nice, nice. Yeah, you're probably really cool at parties, right? When you start speaking Latin.
You can't. It's like not a spoken language. Like nobody speaks it. You write it. It helps me understand. Like when people are speaking Spanish and Italian and Portuguese, I can understand a lot of it, but I can't speak any other language. It was
Do you,
the worst, most pointless 4 years of my life.
I'm sure there were other dumb things that you could have done while
Yeah,
studying, but
yeah.
do you have like a favorite Latin fun fact? Is there something that really sticks out to you from all of your education of Latin?
Not especially. No, no. I mean,
Well,
it's been some time. I've got
and
little
it's
memories
it's
here
like
and
the
there.
Broncos backfield. Like, nothing really stands out. Got
Exactly.
it. Okay. We'll move on from the Latin lesson. I'm going to give you my next pick here, and I'm going with the guy who, man, I get it. He had 1 reception on 1 target, but it was a good one. It was a really good one. Mike Williams, who, I guess it can, Dave, your joke, I'm going to steal it. Sorry. It can only get bigger from here. Like, That's
Did
where
you
we're
hear what
going.
they said after the game when they said Mike Williams had a small package?
Yeah,
Did
no,
you
okay.
hear that?
I tweeted that out yesterday, man. So it's like as right after he scored,
As he's, like, laying
Charles
on the ground
Davis
before he even gets up to celebrate, they're talking about his small package. Those poor Mike
Char-
Williams.
Charles Davis, who loves CD, man, like no disrespect, and I don't think he meant anything by it, but he was trying to insinuate that there was going to be a limited play package for Mike Williams, and
Mhm.
after he scores, he's there like just lauding him, talking about how what a great play that was. He said we knew he had a small package going into this game, and it's just like
The
ah,
disrespect.
pause. We could have worded that better. But yeah, Mike Williams, known grower. The role is going to grow here. The fit with Russell Wilson, I mean, it appears to be something that's going to work out well, man. I mean, I kind of had the thought process that when they did end up with Mike Williams, the Steelers, it's like, okay, well, we already got George Pickens at home. Now we got two George Picken, yeah, whatever. But now we got two of Pickenses. That doesn't sound right. Is there a Latin version? Think of that. But yeah, now they've got both Mike Williams, George Pickens, and this just it fits so well with what Russ likes to do, with just being able to chuck this ball downfield. And Van Jefferson has been fine, but he hasn't really done enough, I think, to hold Mike Williams off the field. And I do expect the role to grow for Mike Williams. This was his first game with the Steelers. I don't think they traded for him just to be like, you know what, I could be wrong, but I don't think that they trade for him just to say, okay, we want you to get 7 snaps per game. I
I
know
mean,
they
they
didn't
were
have to
they
do
were
much.
tied to every wide receiver rumor out there this year, whether
Yeah.
it was, any time a wide receiver was on the trade block, the Steelers seemed to be like the first team, like whether it was Devontae Adams or Brandon Ayuk, like they were always in the market for somebody. So clearly, they thought wide receiver two was a weakness on this team behind Pickens.
Yeah. Also, other weakness, I did not expect that voice to come out of Mike Williams.
Yeah,
Have you heard that
I
yet?
did. Yeah,
The highest pitch, I really want to know like where it is on the like what is it, frequency? Like
octaves.
what determines octaves?
Yeah, frequency, I
Maybe?
believe.
Yeah. All
Pitch,
right. Someone who's smart, put that in the comments or email us
pitch. I think might
fantasy
be
show.
the term.
But there's got to be like an instrument that measures it. Like I'd really want to know. He's definitely a soprano. Like that's I'll say that. Or an alto. It's an alto. Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool.
Soprano. Alto's a bit deeper than a soprano.
Is it?
It is.
We're learning. This is such an
That
educational
is
show today.
Latin, actually.
This is this is the most educational show we have ever had. You're welcome, America. All right, Dave. Let's move on to your next pick.
All right, Cam Akers, and I wrote about Ty Chandler last week in my 3 up, 3 down as a guy who is trending down. And Alfredo, we've talked about this talking point a few times this offseason, or this season, I should say. Is it like players that look good last year look terrible this year, and players that look terrible last year look good this year? And Ty Chandler is one of those guys that I don't know what happened. Like he just forgot how to play football. He has looked so bad this year. Like Cam Akers is not some world beating talent by any means, but he has looked much better than Ty Chandler. And Akers is clearly taken over as the RB2 for the Vikings. He's already got some familiarity in the system. We got to remember he was there last year. They traded him to Houston and then traded to bring him back to Minnesota. And over the last 2 weeks, Akers is out touching Ty Chandler 22-4. I mean, Chandler has just been rendered completely useless in this offense, outpacing him in almost every efficiency metric as well. We saw last week Aaron Jones went down with what looked like a really serious injury. He was carted off the field, sent to the locker room. I believe they said he was doubtful to return, and then he did return in like the very end of the game and got a touch, which seemed a little bit odd. But this is just a reminder that guys do get injured, and Aaron Jones has a history of injuries. He's not a guy who's necessarily been a beacon of health throughout his career. He's been relatively healthy so far this season, but Akers, just like I talked about earlier with Trey Benson, if something happens to the guy ahead of him, is going to have immense upside in this offense. So this is just another cuffing season stash, a guy who probably doesn't have much standalone value here. But if Aaron Jones has to miss next week or any time in the future, Cam Akers is one of those guys that you just keep stashed on your bench, because if Jones has to miss any time, we're looking at, an RB2 floor for Cam Akers in this offense.
Yeah, I have a little bit of worry with Sam Darnold and how much he might be actually turning into a pumpkin at this time of year. But I think you're right. I think the RB2 floor is just going to be there simply because of volume and how good the offense can be. Update on Aaron Jones this morning, by the way. He was talking with Kay Adams, and he said the only reason that he was carted off the field was because the x ray machine was on the other side of the stadium. And they just didn't want to make him walk all the way over there if the injury was worse than expected. And he seems to be very optimistic that he is back to playing again next week. I mean, he did come back into the game, like you mentioned.
Right.
So I think it's just the moral of the story. The takeaway here is Cam Akers remains a really good high end handcuff.
Yeah. I mean, how just egg all over our face, Alfredo. Like zero RB was the way so many people were drafting this year. Now you've got guys like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and James Conner and Aaron Jones. These like aging veterans who always miss some time are just healthy and not missing any time. And here we are going into week 11, and they've still got a clean bill of health. It's kind of crazy to see, but good for them.
This is why I think that data sometimes, like you know, how people say, "Oh, you can't argue with the numbers. You can't argue with data." Actually, you can. You can sometimes. It's like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. The whole thing that was talked about this offseason is that older running backs that change to a new team often are not as productive as they have been in the past. They start
Mhm.
to fall off. Maybe that's going to happen next season, but this year it's been the exact opposite. And I think this is just one of those times where you could say this is a really good player and he's going to a really good offense and there's a lot of opportunity.
My
Sorry,
buddy
data.
my buddy Ben made a joke this morning that I thought was funny. You know, we were talking about historical tendencies and the running back age curves, how that's more of like a touch curve than an age curve. We were talking about this in considering Tyrone Tracy. Oh, you know, that this guy had like no running back touches in college, that even though
Yep.
he's 24, we should be looking at him as a younger player because he doesn't have the wear and tear from college. And then we started talking about whatever. We got there talking about Derrick Henry, about how he is just defying everything we know about age and touch curves. And my buddy said, instead of the Hall of Fame, I think Derrick Henry should just go straight to the Smithsonian because, like, he needs to be studied. Like, there's no reason he should be able to do what he is doing at this age. But playing some of the best football of his career on a new team at 30 years old, that is just completely unheard of.
Easy with how you say touch curves that many times on the podcast. All right. Next pick here. I'm going to go with one that maybe not a lot of people are thinking of, but Dawson Knox, tight end for the Buffalo Bills. He took over for Dalton Kincaid when he left the field due to injury. And after the game, reporters talked to Kincaid and he said, thought I could go, then just didn't feel good enough to run and be able to go out there and protect myself. And he said he does not know the extent of the injury. I guess we're going to find out more as we go along. Honestly, we might have more news by the time this podcast even gets released to the general public. But I would say this: Dawson Knox is a guy that we do need to consider at tight end, especially with just how bad the position has been. We say this all the time: good players, good offenses, right? Dawson Knox is a guy that's flirted with being a top 12 tight end prior to Dalton Kincaid getting drafted, and he's had some really good years, especially with the touchdown upside that he has. There are not many top targets available for the Bills right now with Josh Allen. I know Amari Cooper couldn't play last week. Keon Coleman couldn't play last week. We're really not seeing what we want to see from Curtis Samuel. It's really been the Khalil Shakir show, and Dalton Kincaid and to an extent Dawson Knox have kind of like eaten at each other's role, with Dalton Kincaid being the primary tight end. But if he's going to miss any time, even if it's just one game, Dawson Knox becomes a really good streamer next week at the tight end spot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in so many leagues where I've been streaming tight end, and this week I was going to Taysom Hill, and next week if Dawson Knox is out, or if Dalton Kincaid is out, I'll be going to Dawson Knox in a lot of those leagues. You got to look for the opportunity when it comes, and right now with so many pass catchers banged up, and if Dalton Knox is out of the picture as well, we'll see Dawson Knox do what he did before they drafted Dalton Kincaid, which was consistently giving us top 12 production, finding the end zone often, running a ton of routes. So, yeah, I mean, this is definitely contingent on Keon Coleman still missing time, Amari Cooper still missing time, and Dalton Kincaid potentially missing time as well. But if that happens, Dawson Knox is easily going to be inside my top 7, top 8 next week.
Yeah, those of you who have either Trey McBride or Cade Otton that are going to be on a bye week next week, Dawson Knox becomes the guy.
Yep.
We have the big matchup of the year right now, Bills Chiefs. That should
Hmm.
be a really fun one, a potential shootout there. And Chiefs are allowing the most fantasy points to tight ends on the season, so easy streamer choice for me right there. All right, Dave. Let's go to. We got two more picks here, and then we'll throw in all of our honorable mentions. But give us your last pick.
Got really thin quick, man. You know, we talked about some of the handcuffs that we like, and there's some more out there that we'll talk about as honorable mentions. But for you deep guys out there, you know, you're in a deep league and you really need somebody that you can put in your wide receiver or flex spot. Kayshon Boutte, he's seen three straight games with 6 targets. We talk about this a lot. These guys that kind of are down low on the depth chart, they get some reps in during camp and the preseason with the backup quarterback, and then when that quarterback takes over, there's a connection there, and I think we're seeing that right now with Drake May and Kayshon Boutte. Don't feel great about it. This was a really highly touted prospect. We were talking about him potentially being the wide receiver one in his class, and then he had a really, really down year his final year at LSU, slid down draft boards a little bit. But if he can figure it out, I mean, most of what I've heard, Alfredo, is that it's a lot of I don't know the right word, concentration issues. It's not nobody ever really doubted the athletic ability of Kayshon Boutte. I mean, he
Right.
is a freak athlete. He can run every single route. He can make plays after the catch. He can get behind defenses. He can kind of do it all. A lot of people were talking about him as a Jamar Chase type of player. Whether it's concentration or conditioning, whatever it is, just hasn't really been there so far. But he's displayed a good connection so far with Drake May. And, the arrow could be pointing up from here on a guy who is a very, very good athlete that hasn't really had an opportunity so far in the NFL. So as this Patriots offense gets better, Drake May could keep looking his way. Makes for a stash in deep leagues just to kind of see what happens here.
I have a fun little stat here from our friend of the show, JJ Zachariason, over on Twitter.
All right.
Said Kayshon Boutte ran a route on every single Patriots drop back on Sunday.
Wow.
Wide receiver in second was Demario Douglas, who had a 62% participation rate. So massive disparity between the two. And then Boutte. After 5 straight games to open the season with single-digit percentage target share, Boutte has seen shares of 20.7, 15.4, and 26.1 over the last 3. I think whether we like it or not, no matter who we want to be the top target there, Kayshon Boutte has really carved out a role. And I don't think it's necessarily one of those roles where he's mixing in with other guys. I think it's him and Demario Douglas are the top 2 receivers on this team with Hunter Henry there, and Drake May gives this offense some life. So I actually do like this pickup of Kayshon Boutte. And Dave, you made a trade in our redraft league, or no, dynasty league yesterday.
League, 4th round pick.
Yeah, you traded a 4th round pick for Kayshon Boutte. You
Why not?
messaged the entire league and you're like, send me your worst receiver for a 4th round pick. Someone offered you Kayshon Boutte, you send him back a 4th round pick, and then he does this.
Why not?
Beautiful.
Yeah. And did you see I lost that matchup by less than 2 points? It was just buys and injuries were killing me. You and I did, what was it, like a 4th and a 5th round pick swap for Taysom Hill. And then I also had to trade for Kayshon Boutte just to field a roster this week, and then lost to Ian Hartitz by less than 2 points. So mortgaging my future just to take an L this week. Hate to see it.
The exact parameters of the trade was Taysom Hill and a 4th for a 3rd round pick in our trade.
Hard out here.
Fun. All right, I'm going to give you my last pick here. And honestly, it's mostly because I didn't want to use the name that a lot of other people are going to talk about this week, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I'm going to talk about Adonai Mitchell for the Indianapolis Colts. And I think I've run into this before where we talked about Trey Sermon being a guy to pick up off the waiver wire. And throughout that waiver wire process, me saying, I don't think he's very good at football. And I didn't want to run into that again with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We see this once or twice a year, 2 touchdowns on 3 catches. It's not something that we need to go crazy about.
Let me just put it this way, Alfredo.
Yes.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling couldn't get it done with Aaron Rodgers, couldn't get it done with Patrick Mahomes, couldn't get it done with Josh Allen. If you think that Derek Carr is what Marquez Valdez-Scantling needed to finally become a good football player, that's just not it.
You might be the problem.
This was just a fluke game. I mean, it's as simple as that. Fluke games happen. Everybody was worried about Mason Tipton and Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. I don't think the defense thought twice about MVS. I'm not worried about this.
Yeah, that's why I just
I can't do it. I can't with good conscience. Like I can't with good conscience tell you to go pick up MVS. Like I would. I can't do it.
I don't care what minute we were at in the podcast where it's like, okay, well, people probably stopped listening anyways. I don't care. Like I couldn't actually tell people go get MVS because he's going to be the game changer you need for next week. And honestly, at this point, when you do get this deep into waiver wires, there's probably not a whole lot of game changers. But what I do want are talented football players that if opportunity comes their way, they can do something with it. And Adonai Mitchell for the Colts was able to do that. He tied with his teammate Alec Pierce for the lead in routes run on the Colts. He had 6 receptions on 6 targets. It's actually most receptions of his career and the highest target share of his career. So I know a lot of that has to do with Michael Pittman missing the game, but with a lot of these young guys, we see this, Dave, so often that once they get the opportunity, if they are able to put good stuff on film and they are able to help their team, it's kind of hard to reduce these guys back to a bench role. And now sometimes it happens. Sometimes they just go right back to doing a whole lot of nothing, but he actually looked good. This wasn't like where he came down with a wide open catch or he was getting like easy, ugly crossers. There were times where he was making guys miss after the catch. He was coming down with impressive catches in traffic. AD Mitchell, man, he's a player that I think a lot of people really liked as a rookie. Were surprised that he got drafted as late as he did by the Colts, but this
Oh,
might
we
be the
were.
time
I
of
remember
year.
that live stream
Yeah.
when
Oh
for
yeah.
like a round straight, we're like, he's got to be going off the board, right? Like they got to take AD Mitchell here, and it just kept falling and falling and falling and falling.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought he might end up going at the end of round 1 to a team like the Bills or the Chiefs or something like that, and for him to fall as he did, I think we're seeing a lot of that talent that we saw at the University of Texas, and he looked great. He looked great. So if I do have a deep bench, if I do have a weakness at wide receiver, and I want to go out and just spend $1 of my fab on a player that could potentially have a nice breakout towards the end of the year, AD Mitchell becomes that guy for me.
Yeah, one of my favorite stats about the Texas Longhorns last year, AD Mitchell had 11 touchdowns. The rest of the team combined for 14 receiving touchdowns. That's the team with Xavier Worthy, Jatavian Sanders, Jordan Whittington, Jonathan Brooks. They combined for 14 touchdowns to AD Mitchell's 11. I mean, this guy was just a spark plug last year, and that's why we were shocked that he slid to where he did in the draft. I liked him better than Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy had the speed, but AD Mitchell is just a more well-rounded receiver. He's bigger, he's more physical, he can do more things after the catch. So, yeah, AD Mitchell, I'd put him ahead of Mike Williams as well, who you talked about as an earlier trade dart or waiver wire pickup. Put him ahead of MVS. I think if I'll put him ahead of Kayshon Boutte. He's a guy who, in my opinion, has a higher ceiling if he can figure it out. And looks like Joe Flacco, for whatever reason, is going to remain the starter in Indy. At least that's what we're hearing now on Monday morning. So, yeah, AD Mitchell, really fun player. And we talk about this, these rookies that heat up in the second half of the season. Second half of the season is here. Now AD Mitchell's heating up.
Dave, what I love is your ability to multitask where you are tweeting that you cannot in good faith recommend that anyone place a waiver wire bid on MVS mid
Yeah,
show as I'm ranting about AD Mitchell.
I can't. Yeah, I'm sorry. We were talking about it, and then I just muted my mic and went to Twitter with it because I know that's going to be everybody's waiver recommendation today. It's like MVS, 100 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. Did you see it yesterday? It came in a part-time role on 3 targets. It's just not going to happen again. I just cannot recommend it. Try to, and of course, because now we're like the anti-MVS show. Of course, he's going to go for
He's
2
gonna
touchdowns
pop
again
off,
next week. Yeah,
10 targets, 9 catches, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Derek Carr, Saints. Go Saints. Darren Rizzi, by the way, the Rizzler. Want to
Mhm.
know. Yeah. That's fun. I like to see teams like that when they get the interim coaches and the coach gets that first win. He's so pumped. And
Antonio
honestly,
Pierce last year smoking cigars in the locker room. Yeah, it's
yeah,
awesome.
man, it's so fun. But then there's always that voice in the back of my head that's like the dark side. It's like, oh man, they're not going to keep this job. That
I
never
know.
happens. It rarely happens. It rarely does. But like
Who
you're
was
so
the
pumped up.
guy 2 years ago in Vegas that like the team loved him and like they should have made him the coach and then they went out and
Oh,
they
it
brought
was
in
the special teams
Bisaccia,
coordinator. Yeah,
Rich Bisaccia. Like
I
he
almost
did
called him like a Sultan Boca.
Rich Bisaccia, like he stepped in and did great. And like this team caught this like second wind out of nowhere late in the year and they won some games and everybody rallied behind him and then they said, "Nope, sorry, we're going to bring in Josh McDaniels."
Dude, you want to know
Shame.
which one hurt me the most? When the Dolphins fired their coach back in 2015.
Mhm.
Can't remember who it was. They fired so many coaches. They fired Adam Gase. And Dan Campbell,
Oh,
the tight ends
yeah.
coach, became the interim head coach.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Went 5-7 over the final 12 games. It was the most fun I had been having as a Dolphins fan in
Was
the
that the
longest
Jay
time.
Cutler year?
It may have been. I think it was. I think it was. Dude,
What a time to be alive.
there's been so much trash just coming through Miami. Hopefully get a win tonight. It actually very random. The Dolphins, I read that if they win tonight, they are technically in the last spot in the AFC for the playoffs, or they're like a game out. And if they lose tonight, they are the number 3 pick in the NFL draft. What a fork in the road for Miami.
Yeah, big game.
Yeah. All right, let's hop into the other names to consider here. And like every week, we're just going to list out a bunch of names, and if there's one that pops out to you, Dave, talk about them. So here we go. Russell Wilson, MVS, Khalil Herbert, Jalen Wright, Jalen Coker, Elijah Moore, Tylan Wallace, Jordan Mims.
Yeah, I think Russ Wilson is the big one for me that jumps out. He's been very solid since he took over as a starter in Pittsburgh, and Kyler's on bye next week. Baker's on bye next week. So I think a lot of people are going to be looking to the waiver wire. Russell Wilson is basically giving you 20 points a week. And, I don't know why he's still unrostered in as many leagues as he is, but he'll make for a really nice bye week filler there. Khalil Herbert is definitely a guy that I want to pick up if he's still available, despite what we saw last week, just 2 snaps, one of them being a botched handoff that was fumbled. But did you see the report that came out this morning about the Cincinnati Bengals, Alfredo, that they are bringing in Leonard Fournette for a workout? So
Stop.
Chase Brown has looked great for the last 2 weeks, but I don't know if they just don't trust him with the full workload. They're looking to add depth here. Obviously, Zach Moss is out for the season, so they're trying to address the RB2 spot. But um, I don't know what that workload is going to look like. Like if they, continue to let Khalil Herbert's role grow a little bit, bring in Leonard Fournette. Weird as that may sound, I don't know if that's just lack of faith in Khalil Herbert or what it is, but this workhorse treatment we've been seeing from Chase Brown, I'm hoping it's not going to be short lived because we know this guy can handle a huge workload. He did it when he was at Illinois, second in the league in touches behind only Bijan Robinson in his final year, but seems like for whatever reason they want to keep him in a more complimentary role.
Yeah, I don't.
Not a complimentary role. I think he'll be the RB1A, if you
I
will,
get,
but
I get what you
they
meant.
want
Like
somebody there to take the load off his shoulders.
yeah, they're not comfortable saying it's kind of like what the Cowboys have been doing with Rico Dowdle, where they're like, "Yeah, you're our guy," but also like we just want to have someone in there to
Right.
take some of the pressure off you. I think that most NFL teams are just going to do that. Like, even if you're Derrick Henry, the Ravens are throwing out Justice Hill, and people are getting excited about Keaton Mitchell again, which that's another name to consider here. We had a couple people asking, "Really, no Keaton Mitchell hype?" No, no, I'd love to be
Yeah.
hyped about it, but the other running backs are already playing really well. I would have said Khalil Herbert as well, just because it's in my DNA to do that. But you know what, the guy I want to talk about, who I didn't talk about last week, you did, Jalen Coker,
Yeah.
and to see him come out and once again lead the team in targets. The Panthers don't look good, but they're winning games, and Bryce Young doesn't look as abominable as he has in the past, and Jalen Coker is out there. I mean, he was second on the team in a routes run. He was second on the team in snaps, and led the team in targets. Now, how valuable were those targets? Not very, not very. 3 catches on 8
Yeah.
targets, but the targets, they do insinuate that Bryce Young is looking his way, and I don't know if
Multiple
it's
drops too, which was frustrating. Like
yeah.
that's been the theme of Bryce Young's season, like him just throwing some money balls that are just dropped. And Coker had a couple tough drops yesterday.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the way that not only Dave Canales but everyone has to look at this Panthers team is like there's just going to be the literal and metaphorical drops each week where it's just going to be these growing pains, and
Yeah.
I wonder how much of it is Bryce Young kind of working with the second team offense in his time as the backup while Andy Dalton was a starter that got him just a little bit more comfortable with Jalen Coker, and sometimes it just happens. Sometimes it just happens. We're in a practice or in a practice setting. Something clicks between that
Yep.
quarterback and that receiver, and their timing is always right. And so, whether it was the drops or whatever it may be, there's something that has sort of a magnet on Jalen Coker for Bryce Young.
The one last guy I'll mention too, Jalen Wright is playing tonight.
Mhm.
So you might be able to drop somebody who's on bye, or if you're in one of those leagues that allows you to drop
Yep.
somebody after they've played, do that and pick up Jalen Wright tonight.
Yes.
Saw it last week. Raheem Mostert had a fumble in the middle of the game and then didn't get a touch after that. And Jalen Wright is another one of these rookies that we were really, really excited for. And his opportunity came early in the season when Raheem Mostert got hurt. I just think that he wasn't up to NFL speed yet, but over the last couple of weeks, he seems to be getting more comfortable. Very similar to Trey Benson, a guy who got some run early in the year and looked terrible and now is starting to look much, much better. We're seeing that with Jalen Wright as well. So Raheem Mostert, getting up there in age, had a tough fumble last year. I don't want to predict it. A lot of people are going to watch this game before Monday night. Some are going to watch it after Monday night, and I could have egg all over my face. But don't be surprised if we see that switch happen where Jalen Wright can kind of take some of the work away from Raheem Mostert and kind of get a little test run at that RB2 job before the season ends.
You like to say egg all over your face quite a bit. To me, that's just it's a
Yeah.
waste of good groceries.
I want to
Eggs
check
are
right now
expensive.
too. Well, while you're talking, I want to look up the Raheem Mostert contract because that will tell me to. Yeah, I mean they've
You,
got
you
an
better
out.
hurry because I'm about to give us an outro.
I mean they've got an out built into his contract. I'm looking right now. Looks like they could save about $3 million if they cut Raheem
Yeah.
Mostert this offseason. It would be the difference between paying him $4 million next year or eating $1 million in dead cap. So if Jalen Wright does look good, they might be willing to make that choice this offseason. Again, just a big fan of Jalen Wright. He's looked good over the last couple of weeks. If you can afford to pick him up and stash him before tonight's game, because if he does look good tonight, everybody is going to be going crazy for him on the waiver wire. You might be able to get him for free now.
Get rookie running backs on your bench going into the end of the season. Blake Corum as well. All of
Yep.
them. Just do it. Thank us later.
Yep.
That's it for us today. Dave and I are going to be back again tomorrow on the audio side. So if you have not subscribed to the show on Apple or Spotify, check the description of this show and we will have that for you. You can just click the link and subscribe to the audio side of this show. Where we're going to be doing our weekly vibes check. We're just going to take a look at some of the biggest questions or talking points that we have across the NFL and how they're affecting fantasy football. And then actually on Wednesday this week, we're going to kick off a series that we're going to be doing with our normal guests. Instead of doing the rest of season rankings, we are going to be looking at players that you guys, if you're listening, it's because you're in contention for a playoff spot or you probably have it secured. But we're going to be talking about players that you need to be stashing for the playoffs, and that means either sending out a low ball trade offer, picking up someone off the waiver wire, any type of players that you need to be stashing for the playoffs because there is a very favorable playoff schedule for them, or the role could just grow. And as always, we're going to be back again on Thursday with the starts and streamers of the week. And Dave is back on Friday with Jeff Bell for the injury report and news updates that they do every week on the audio side as well. And Sunday morning, live start sit with Joey Wright, Jagger May, Jeff Bell, Adam Hutchison, and all of the Football Guys staffers here. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave Kluge, we'll see you next time. Adios.